everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. We begin today with guidance for producers ahead of planting wheat pasture. Here's SUNUP's Dave Deacon and our precision nutrient management specialist, Dr. Brian Arnall.
Many of the fields across Oklahoma that are going dual purpose are looking like this one right here. Brian, what should producers be thinking about whenever they're actually planting their seeds?
Yeah, so right now is the time to make sure we have a good seed-soil contact when we're thinking about planting. Also got to be thinking about fertility. You know, with everything that's going on, we need that crop to have a good start, a good base to get going. Even if you haven't fertilized that grazing wheat yet, we need to get fertility down pretty soon so that it has enough to make that forage for that grazing. We like to put down at least 60 pounds of nitrogen for each ton of forage that we expect to produce. Now that's with soil test nitrogen, so we take our yield goal times 60 minus soil test, so 1 or 2 ton goal plus that 6 times that 60 pounds and subtract the soil test. But I also like to put down some starter fertilizer. So typically with our wheat, that's a dry fertilizer in the form of 18-46-0. That's 18% nitrogen, 46% phosphorus, and 0% potassium. That's DAP or MAP, which is 11-52-0. I like that not because of the nitrogen. We have a lot of people that want to think about nitrogen in furrow. And while you can, I don't see much benefit of that. I want the phosphorus in furrow. It's that middle number, the 18 or 52, that phosphorus that does us 2- and 3-fold. One, having phosphorus banded is a more efficient way to apply it. It puts it in a concentrated zone that doesn't get tied up by the soil cations of calcium and aluminum and iron. It also helps us alleviate some of our pH issues that we'll see across the fields. So even if your field composite pH is a 5.5 or 5.6, which is pretty good for most of our wheat ground, there's going to be areas that are acidic. Having that banded phosphorus really alleviates the aluminum toxicity that comes from low pH. So I want to see, if we have good soil test phosphorus, I want to see 40 to 50 pounds of product that's DAP or MAP in furrow, helping us get a good start, getting those roots going and alleviating any aluminum. If we have low soil test phosphorus, then we add that on top of that starter rate, especially in our lower pHs. That gets us a good start, good stand establishment, and having that nitrogen 60 pounds per ton in the ground ready to go is what we need to get us for that forage coming into the fall.
Let's talk about application moving forward, because that's getting the seed in the ground and slight emergence there. What should producers be thinking about, say, a couple weeks from now, a couple months from now?
So we need to keep an eye on it. One, if you've got the nitrogen on, then it's just keep an eye on it, making sure that it's growing well, looking for pests. We always have army cutworms come through, so keep an eye on your insects and such. If you don't have your nitrogen on, and you're worried about getting it on, it's okay. That crop, especially if you have some starter, that crop can go for a while without any significant loss of production. So get the wheat in the ground and get it up. Stand established is more important now. And then come back after that wheat's up and add some nitrogen, whether it's urea or UAN. Let the weathers cool and make sure that application is right. And we also have in the next couple weeks planning for our grain only that will be going in October.
I remember a few years ago you explained to me what the N, the P, and the K do to the plant. Yeah. So the phosphorus actually helps with the root growth. Talk about the other, the N and the K in there also.
So phosphorus is helping with root growth. It's actually kind of the energy source for the plant. Nitrogen is a critical component. It's the building block of amino acids, of proteins, and we need it for chlorophyll. So it really helps with biomass and production and chlorophyll. And our potassium is really our regulator. It has a lot of functions, but when it comes to Oklahoma, a big function is water control. It controls the stomatal opening and closing. So we need good potassium management to make sure that when we go dry, it manages, that the crop can manage through it, which is why we need that pre-plant soil test to know where we sit at. Whether it's a composite, a zone, or a grid, that gives us a starting point for NPK and pH that we can't just get from anything else.
Mm-hmm. And county educators are able to help out with that.
Absolutely. Go to your county educators, go talk to them, help get a soil sample. They can send it to Oklahoma State University, the soil testing lab down there, and get the recommendations that you need.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Brian Arnall, soil nutrition specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Dr. Kim Anderson, our crop marketing specialist, joins us now. Kim, let's kick things off this week looking at grain prices.
Well, grain prices have really been moving in the right direction the last month. Let's start the second week in August with the leader, soybeans. Soybean futures contract price moved from $8.70 a bushel to $10.40. That's a $1.70 increase, or a 20% increase in soybean prices. Corn prices, they moved on the futures from $3.20 to $3.75. A 55-cent move, or a 17% move there. Milo or sorghum's moving about 90 to 95 cents higher than corn. And then you've got wheat. That wheat futures contract moved from $4.25 to $5.05. It broke that $5 mark there just for a little while. That's 80 cents, or 19% price increase. Current wheat prices are around $4.50 a bushel.
I like the sound of all of this. Is it because of higher demand or lower supply?
Yes. Both. Mostly demand in this case. There's been chatter in the market about panic buying. Around the world, COVID's kind of raising its ugly head again. Egypt is buying, trying to get 6 months out ahead of things, and been a big buyer in the wheat market. You've got China since September the 11th has bought U.S. soybeans every market day. They bought a lot of corn over in that time period. So you got the importers around the world bringing in and buying and importing product.
In terms of the United States and the Black Sea, what are you seeing there in terms of prices?
Well, if you look at the United States, we this week sold some hard red winter wheat, 12.5% protein, to Taiwan. That was $279 a metric ton at Seattle Port. That's $7.59 a bushel. Now, Russia sold wheat to Egypt for $243 a metric ton. That's $6.61 a bushel FOB.
Do you expect these prices to remain strong?
I think they'll remain relatively strong, at least for a little while. The question is are we buying this wheat in front? And so we've got really strong demand right now, and as we go out later in the year, they've already got that wheat in storage, and so they won't buy as much. So there's some potential there, but I think prices will stay at current levels. I don't expect them to go much higher, but it is possible.
With all this in mind, should producers sell their wheat?
If I had some wheat in the bin, I'd be selling some of it at this price. This is a relatively good price, given that we're looking at record world wheat production, we're looking at record world corn production, and we're looking at record world soybean production. A lot of product out there to go on the market.
All righty, Kim, thanks a lot. We'll see you next week.
Welcome to the Mesonet Weather Report. I'm Wes Lee. Another week of great weather if you like fall-like temperatures, and for part of the state, a much-needed rain brought on by the outer bands of the tropical storm Beta in the Gulf. Here we see where the rains fell for the past week as of Wednesday morning. As is often the case, it fell mostly on the east and left the west high and dry. The highest rainfall totals were at Broken Bow with 3.2 inches, followed by Arnall with just over 2.5 inches. It has been 2 to 3 weeks in the western half of the state since 1/10 of an inch of rain has been recorded. This is causing soil moisture to deplete faster than we would like. This map is the 4-inch percent plant available water. At 100%, this particular soil type would be considered saturated, and at 0%, there would be no moisture left available for plants. Not only can you see our two biggest problem areas in red, but the yellows are starting to show areas of concern. I don't have any good news about the prospects of rain next week. The browns in this map indicate a lower than normal chance of rain. Unfortunately, the 1 and 3 month prospect maps look very similar. Gary is up next with a bigger picture of the moisture situation.
Thanks, Wes, and good morning, everyone. Well, as Wes mentioned, we did get a bit of rain across eastern Oklahoma, but we certainly need some across western Oklahoma. I'm afraid it didn't show up, and it might not show up for quite a while. Let's take a look at that newest drought monitor and see what we have. We have the same basic pattern that we've had for quite a while now. The only problem is it's not shrinking enough. In fact, we have a new spot of D2 there in Beaver County. The same situation across the panhandle that we've seen, a little bit drier across western Oklahoma, still that same pattern, west central Oklahoma down into far southwestern Oklahoma, still with severe to extreme drought. And again, not enough rainfall to alleviate the dry conditions in those areas. Now, if you believe the Climate Prediction Center's outlooks for October and then the October through December timeframe, I'm afraid it's not looking great for Oklahoma. We do see for that October timeframe, we see increased odds of above normal temperatures, especially across the western two-thirds of the state. And the worst news is we see increased odds below normal precipitation across nearly the entire state, all except the far southeastern parts of the state, which of course they don't need the rainfall like other parts do. But that's definitely a bad signal with the temperature and precipitation for October for Oklahoma. As we go out into the October through December timeframe, so averaging those 3 months together, we do see again increased odds of above normal temperatures, especially across the far western portions of the state, but really the entire state. And then we see again increased odds of below normal precipitation across all of Oklahoma, but especially that southern tier of the counties along the Red River. Again, this is the classic La Nina representation of our climate during the cool season. So we start to see that warmer and drier than normal weather across the southern tier of the United States, including Oklahoma. So we really need a pattern change. We need some storm systems to drive down here, bring us some moisture, especially if we end up being drier than normal throughout the rest of fall and into the early winter. So let's hope we can get a pattern change. That's it for this time. We'll see you next time on the Mesonet Weather Report.
Talking research now. OSU ag researchers continue to explore ways to manage an invasive species that affects pastures and grazing. SUNUP's Curtis Hare returns to Ouachita County for a progress report.
Yeah, the whole reason we set these plots up was because we hear from landowners and we hear from land management agencies all the time about what a difficult plant this is to control.
This plant may look harmless, but Old World bluestem is a major problem for Oklahoma landowners and producers. For the past 2 years, Oklahoma State University researchers have tried to find the most effective management practice in controlling it.
Typically, when you look at management of an invasive plant, you're looking at some kind of mechanical or physical control. And so for this purpose, it was burning, mowing, and haying, and tillage. But then also an herbicide application.
Using plots at the Klemme Research Station in Ouachita County, researchers put these practices to the test last summer, and today they're sharing their initial findings with colleagues.
The benefit of a demonstration plot like this is that it's accessible to the public, right? And so we've had personnel from NRCS, FSA, ODWC, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service here today. Those are the people who are really going to be able to take the story and take it back to their producers.
Old World bluestem was first introduced to the state in the 1980s. As part of the Conservation Reserve Program, or CRP, the grass was planted to help combat soil erosion and serve as another forage option.
But since that time, we've found that Old World bluestem has escaped the boundaries within the field it was planted. They've escaped and they've started to invade along roadsides and certainly into our native grasslands.
Old World bluestem, like a lot of these exotic invasive grasses, tends to form a really thick mat of vegetation that inhibits anything else from growing.
Although it's been only 2 years of research and 1 year of testing the management practices, the bluestem team is already seeing some unexpected results.
The management practice that surprised me the most was the July burn.
So we didn't really expect a whole lot from a prescribed fire treatment, but we decided to put a prescribed fire treatment in a July burn, so right in the peak of the growing season. And it did surprise us at the amount of kill that we saw on Old World bluestem, and that probably has something to do with the physiology of that plant, that its nodes, its growth points are elevated during that time of year, and the fire is very effective at killing that grass. So 2 years in a row, we had greater than 90% kill of Old World bluestem from an early July burn.
Contact herbicides like glyphosate also shows promise, but none of these practices are likely the silver bullet alone.
Again, the Old World bluestem can come back from seed, whether it's from after fire or after herbicide. So it's probably going to take a combination of treatments.
Old World bluestem is invasive, and though OSU researchers are trying to control it, the plant does have value.
It's really resistant to grazing. Even when grazed heavily, it can recover pretty easily, even in dry regions. And one of the bigger benefits that folks really like is how productive it is. So it produces lots of forage. This plant, if it would stay where it was planted, it wouldn't be a problem, but unfortunately it moves into other areas where we don't want it, and then it does outcompete some of our native plants. We're at the point with Old World bluestem in Oklahoma that I don't see us being able to eliminate it even if we tried really hard. Helping to keep it from taking over areas, but also making it as good a forage as it can be in the areas that it is.
The research here on bluestem will go another year, and then after that, researchers are going to shift their focus to the larger scale in the pasture, with the ultimate goal of getting their findings out to the landowners and producers here in Oklahoma. In Ouachita County, I'm Curtis Hare.
The first round of the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program has wrapped up. Here to talk about it with us is Dr. Amy Hagerman, our Ag Policy Specialist. Amy, let's just kind of start with a general status report.
So the September 11th was the last day for producers to sign up for what we call CFAP 1, the first round of the Coronavirus Food Assistance Program, which is actually funded out of the CARES Act from April, along with a lot of other initiatives like PPP that people may be familiar with. We had a lot of agricultural producers in the state sign up for this. Nationally, almost $10 billion of money went out between May and September on this program, and that's a huge achievement. We had about $375 million come here to Oklahoma, and the vast majority of that went to our cattle producers in the state, especially some of our stocker producers who had some really deep losses, as Derrell Peel has talked about, associated with the market downturns from this program. So first round kind of wrapped up, but we didn't spend the full $16.5 billion that the CARES Act allocated to this program, which has kind of led us to the events of the last week with the announcement of CFAP 2.
So now we get organized for round 2, and it doesn't look quite the same.
It actually looks very different. So for anyone who's coming in thinking that they kind of understand how it's going to work based on CFAP 1, they changed a lot in CFAP 2. The first thing for our producers here in Oklahoma is they really opened up the list of commodities that can apply for this CFAP money in this second round. This includes different kinds of crops that didn't meet those price criteria that were necessary for CFAP 1. This means our winter wheat producers are now eligible. There's also some restrictions in other areas. So for our cattle producers who received both a sales-based payment and then an inventory-based payment this last round in CFAP 1, this time breeding stock is not eligible for CFAP 2.
How do people who may be eligible get organized and possibly get started for this next round?
Absolutely. The first thing is going to be talking to your FSA office to make sure you have all the reports on file, especially for our crop producers. So for the crops that have that price trigger payment still, it's going to be based on their 2020 crop report that they filed with FSA. So they're not going to self-report their planted acres. That's going to come directly from within the FSA system. The other kind of important piece there is they're going to use their actual yield that they've reported to FSA as well.
But you and the team are helping folks sort it out. You have a webinar coming up soon for the CFAP portion.
We do. For CFAP 2, we have a webinar coming up. That's where we'll go into those payment details, the eligibility details. And USDA has a decision tool online that people can use to get an estimate of their payment. Again, those actual numbers for crop producers are coming from the reports they've already put in. But the tool will give them an estimate of what their payment would be, and we'll be walking people through that decision tool as well.
Great. Okay, Amy, thanks a lot. And for a link to the webinar information, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
For spring calving cow-calf operations, now's the time when preg checking will take place, when we'll find out which of these cows got bred in the last breeding season. At this time is a good time to really take care of proper cow culling. While those cows are going through the chute, being preg checked, is a good time to evaluate whether they're a possible candidate to be culled out of the herd this fall or winter. This, of course, brings up the point that having good records of individually identified cows really becomes helpful. That way, as the cow comes through the chute, we know what her age is. As far as what age has to do with cow culling, I think we can take a look at some big data sets that came out of Florida years and years ago, where they looked at in 1 year over 11,000 cows, and the next year about 13,000 cows, and followed them by age groups in terms of their productivity the following year. And what this data set showed us was that these cows stayed pretty even until about 8 years of age. And as they went from 8 to 10, there was a slight decline in productivity. The real decline started after the cows were 10 years of age, where it's a pretty sharp drop off between 10 and 12, and then, as you can expect, after those cows were 12 years of age, it falled off very, very steeply. So as these cows come through and we see that the cow is 8 years and older, then we might want to start looking at other aspects of her health. We probably want to take a look at the eye health to make sure there's no indications of cancer eye beginning to develop. Watch for little tumors, pink tumors in the corner of the eye or on that area where the color of the eye meets the white of the eye. That's a possibility then that this cow has precancerous situation. We may want to watch her pretty carefully throughout the winter. We don't want that eye to become totally engulfed in cancer, because then we'll end up with a carcass that probably will be totally condemned. Look at the feet and legs. Make sure the cow can travel easily and doesn't have any indication of severe lameness. If the lameness was due to something like an infection, foot rot for indication, then think about if you have treated that cow with an antibiotic, make sure you don't cull her until after the withdrawal date for that particular medication. Look at the teeth of the cattle. Do they have a sound mouth so that they can go ahead and consume forages? There's other reasons to cull cows, such as bad udders and certainly bad disposition. But doing this in a timely manner so that these cows can be marketed while they're still in good body condition, they're healthy enough to go to the market and not receive a severe discount is pretty important. We know that cull cows represent about 20% of the overall income of any beef cow operation. So doing a good job of properly culling those cows at the right time helps us as producers and helps the entire beef industry, making sure that we're presenting a wholesome product to our consumers. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
Well, we'll be seeing a lot of calves marketed this fall. So Derrell, how's the feeder cattle market shaping up?
Well, you know, we're moving into the fall, actually pretty strong right now, reasonably strong anyways. The markets are holding together pretty well. I think one of the real questions this fall will be sort of how the wheat pasture develops. We had a nice early start for some people. Some people have actually been too wet to plant, but they're ready to plant. But it's been fairly dry the last couple of weeks, at least in a lot of areas, so we have to watch that going forward. If the wheat comes on nicely, then I think we'll have good stocker demand, and that'll help support these calf prices this fall.
So is there anything else that producers, cow-calf producers can do to add value to their cattle?
Well, you know, we've been talking about this for many, many years, but we still see, you know, a lot of, bull calves come to town, not castrated. If you look at a recent market report, those bull calves get about $60 a head or a little bit more, less than steers of the same quality and size. So it's worth taking a little time to do that. Weaning those calves, 45-day weaning period is good, giving them their vaccinations. If they haven't had any vaccinations yet, you can give one pre-weaning and another one at weaning, or you can give one at weaning and then a couple weeks after weaning. Get those respiratory and clostridial vaccines in those calves.
You know, speaking of the weaning and all that, the Oklahoma Quality Beef Network, it's that time of year, those sales are going on. Are Oklahoma producers allowed to participate in those?
You bet. We do have several sales scheduled this fall for the Oklahoma Quality Beef Network. The deadline is actually passed on a couple of the earlier sales, but there's several more scheduled, and we're right up against the deadline to get the 45-day weaning period in place. So, producer would need to move pretty fast, but there is an opportunity there, and we have lots of data for many years to show the value of those sales. So, there's more information on the sales and getting registered for those at oqbn.okstate.edu.
So with everything that's happened so far this year in 2020, should cattle producers retain ownership going forward?
Well, it's something to take a look at. I think every producer has to evaluate that. But if you look just at the prices of feeder cattle this fall, depending on the size you start with and how long or how much weight you might be looking to put on, there does seem to be some opportunities there. So depends on what your resources are, what your management and labor situation is in terms of being able to take care of those calves, but it's certainly a consideration. So maybe you follow a preconditioning program by holding onto those calves even longer and putting some additional weight on them in a backgrounding or a stocker type program.
All righty, Derrell. Dr. Derrell Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
Thanks so much for joining us this week for SUNUP. Remember, you can find us anytime on our website and also follow us on YouTube and social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, everyone. And remember, Oklahoma agriculture starts at SUNUP.